Good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Reclaiming Your Time. Can I just check that you can all hear me okay? If you could just pop in a wee message in the chat box just to let me know that you can hear my voice. Perfect, thank you. Before we get started, I just want to quickly run through the Zoom settings. You can select audio settings to select and test your speakers. Submit any questions you've got using this Q&A button. Please feel free to pop in any questions you have throughout the webinar and we will answer any questions you have at the end. The raise hand function here allows attendees to ask questions live, which we won't be able to do in this webinar. So if you do have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. You can click leave meeting if you do need to leave at any time. If you do leave and also at the end of the webinar, there will be a short questionnaire for you to complete. If you could please fill that in for us, we really do appreciate all the feedback we can get. So just a quick introduction. My name is Ikra Aslam, and for those of you who don't know me, I am one of the client managers here at Roslin Associates. The other presenter with me today is Ian McLeish, one of the directors at Roslin Associates, and he will be taking over from me halfway through. Before I get started, you are probably wondering why an accountancy firm is doing a webinar on reclaiming time. Well, as some of you will know, we also provide business development services, covering business plans and forecasts, but it's not always about numbers, it's also about helping businesses grow and achieving their goals. Obviously by looking at numbers, but also looking at things like business structure, the business's values, ideal client or customer, coaching and accountability. In saying that, within our team, we actually have qualifications in, for example, counselling and NLP. As you're here now, you've taken the first step to reclaiming your time. It's the people who aren't here that perhaps need to hear these messages even more. So well done for being here, and I appreciate you making this choice. And we will do our best to give you as much value as we can. Let's consider our thought of the day, which is this quote: either run the day or it runs you. This reflects the theme for today's webinar. It's all about you taking control. And you can take some learnings from today, implement it, as well as teach it to your team. So what are we going to cover today? Well, I'm going to discuss why we will always be busy and also look at some mindsets that can help us reclaim our time. I'll also identify where time is being wasted before passing it over to Ian, who will give you some practical ways to free up your time and what to do with it. He'll also discuss your next steps and we will answer any questions you may have at the end. So please do put them in the Q&A box as we go along. Do take some notes. You should have received the slides in an email which we sent out, and we'll also send out a copy of the recording at the end of the webinar, either tomorrow or early next week. So please do put in any questions you've got in the Q&A box. So to get started, I want to do some I want to get an interaction with you guys. So I'm going to run a quick poll. We're going to put a link in the chat box. If you could click on the chat box, there should be a link in there. If you could click on that, the question is, how do you feel when you're under time pressure? And I'll just give you a minute or so to pop in some answers and hopefully they'll feed through onto my screen here. So I'll just give you a minute or so. So the question is, how do you feel when under time pressure? Just refresh my screen and hopefully some answers will come through. Okay, so we've got worried, annoyed, stressed, focused, unorganized, anxious, So the bigger the words pop up on the screen, the more of you have actually said that word. So as you can see, stressed is quite large there on the screen, which means quite a lot of you have put the word stressed. Okay, we've got more coming through. We've got determined, frustrated, unorganised, driven, annoyed, okay, so hopefully by going through today's webinar, we can help with those feelings. So to kick off, let's have a look at why we'll always be busy. And here are my top 5 reasons. Number 1, work expands to the time available. This is known as Parkinson's law. If you want to find out more about it, just Google it. There's heaps of information about it. But what it basically means is that if you were to give yourself a whole day to complete a 2-hour task, then psychologically speaking, the task will increase in complexity and become more daunting, so you fill the day with that particular task. It might not be that you fill the entire day on doing the actual task, but you might spend time being stressed about doing it. If you think about budgets and times allocated to jobs, when you have that in place, it brings focus on how much time you have available to do it. The second one is distractions. There will always be distractions. When you start a specific job, your phone pings with an email notification, and before you know it, you've replied to 5 emails and you've been scrolling through Facebook for the past hour. It happens to us all. But as Ian's listening, I don't do it. The third one, is our perception of busyness changes. For example, when you were in high school, you might have done 1 hour of homework per day, and trying to fit that into everything else you had to do as a teenager made you feel very busy. You then went to university and your workload increased, and so you produced more, and you still feel busy. You then joined full-time work or started a business. Your workload increased even more, and you still feel busy. So as we progress through life, what being busy means changes. It also changes from person to person. The perception that busy means you are successful. Just because someone says that they are busy, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are being productive or that they have a successful business. You could be busy doing everyday tasks which don't help grow your business. You could be busy working in your business and making a loss. On the other hand, if you manage to reclaim some of your time and spend time working on your business, you could become more successful. The last one is being too busy is often an excuse. When we have more time, we don't necessarily do the things we wish to achieve. For example, working on your business is so often put on the back burner. Likewise, we put books aside to read and somehow never get round to reading them. How many unread books do you have waiting for your spare time? In other words, we choose to work in the way that we do. So we have to make better choices about how to reclaim our time. So let's have a look at some helpful mindsets to get us started. I'd like to start off by looking at the 7 habits of highly effective people, developed by Stephen Covey. The first 3 habits relate to managing and reclaiming your time, so I'll only be talking about these today. The first habit is to be proactive. Make a choice to improve your life and business through the things that you can control. Being reactive is going on and on for hours about things that we can't control. For example, how much have you heard people complain about being in lockdown? A proactive person would say, okay, I've complained about lockdown and of course it's justified, but that doesn't help me or my business. So I'm going to focus on what I can control. What can I do to improve my business, products or services whilst being in lockdown? Is there another way I can serve my clients? That sort of questioning and working on your business takes a lot of dedication and hard work. That's why we naturally default to complaining about things we can't control. So that's the first habit, being proactive. The second habit is to begin with the end in mind. What does that mean? Well, if you were to ask yourself the question, how do I want to be remembered? Whether that's how do you want to be remembered within your business? How do you want to be remembered by a customer or client? Or even how do you want to be remembered as a person? Once you've had a think about that, use that and your values as a framework for decision making. Use them to set goals for your business and for your life, and then focus on achieving them. That's the second habit. Begin with the end in mind. Now, if I was to ask you, what are the most important things to you in your business or in your life? You may answer growing your business to 1 million turnover or spending time with my family. You would never answer organising my paperwork or watching TV. But how many of us spend time organising paperwork and watching TV rather than working on the business and making a plan to achieve the most important things in your business? There is a disconnection between what we say we are going to focus on and how we actually spend our time. So that's habit number 3. Put first things first. Go and get yourself the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, to read up on it more. It's a highly recommended book, and Ian even has about 3 copies of it. So that just shows how highly recommended and important this book is. You may have seen this mindset before, as we refer to it often, but that just shows the importance of it. Today, I want to link it to the habits we've just spoke about. Being proactive is about staying above the line and focusing on what we can control, not being a victim and saying that there's nothing you can do about the lack of time that you have. As confronting as it may sound, you're choosing to be as busy as you are. More specifically, you're choosing to do the things that you're doing. We have always wanted to provide more education to our clients and wider connections. In the past, we've made many excuses of why we couldn't do it. 2 years ago, we went above the line and realised that we owe it to you guys to do this, and took the responsibility for creating the time to make sure it happened. We started by doing seminars, and then a year ago this month, because of lockdown, we stayed above the line and took ownership and responsibility again, and adapting and providing webinars. It would have been so easy for us to fall below the line and come up with excuses, which is why this mindset is so important. The third mindset I want to share with you is atomic habits, which speaks directly to starting with the end in mind habit. Building identity-based habits will enable you to better prioritise your time and achieve better results. By focusing on who you need to be, your identity, and choosing habits consistent with that identity, your desired outcomes will flow more easily. From a reclaiming your time perspective, let's focus on your identity. Say you want to be a more proactive and focus on what you can control, but you find yourself being distracted at times. Imagine you've set yourself some time to complete a business plan and actions along with that business plan. Then an email pops up on your screen. This is called the queue. Now, you can't stop thinking about it, and you want to check who the email is from and what it says. That's the craving. So you open the email and you think to yourself, it's just a short email from a client and you know the answer, so you quickly tap out a response, and 10 minutes later, you've hit send. The reward is that you feel satisfied that you've responded to the client's email. And then before you know it, you're on to the next email, and so on and so on. What we need to do is remove the queue or replace it. What if you switched off your email and phone notifications while you were working on your business? The queue could be a list of step-by-step actions from your business plan. Then the craving becomes wanting to tick off each of the actions on your list. The response is that you've spent Friday morning on your business plan actions. And then the reward is that you get to take the rest of the afternoon off and head off to the golf course, which you wouldn't have been able to do if you didn't spend time working on your business. Only you can adjust your behaviour. And if you want to reclaim your time, you've got to do something different. Now, Let's look at what you can do differently using a time management model, which I'm sure you've seen before. This is known as Achiever Matrix, also created by Stephen Covey. In a nutshell, this matrix reflects that we will all live in a time-pressured world with multiple overlapping commitments. So, separating tasks into these 4 quadrants helps us to better manage a flood of responsibilities, do excellent work, and maintain a positive frame of mind. It directly reflects the 3rd habit of highly effective people: put first things first. We need to spend less time working in the urgent quadrants and more time working in quadrant 2, the quadrant of quality. This is the quadrant of planning, prevention, and innovation. This is where we will improve our processes, and it's where we are most productive. It is also where we can prevent a number of important things from becoming urgent and falling into the 1st quadrant, the quadrant of urgency. We also need to assess what things are not important that are distracting us from working in quadrant of quality. What interruptions can we reduce or remove? What strategies can we use to reclaim some of that time on the non-important things? Well, luckily for us, Ian is now going to talk us through some strategies we can use to reclaim our time.
Thanks, Ikra. Just a quick word about, again, Ikra touched on this, but why we're doing this. The purpose, our core purpose at Roslin Associates is, what part of it is to help people reclaim their time, to get time and freedom. All too often, business owners start off their business, and eventually at some point they end up working 60 hours a week, even more. So our strategy, our plan is to get our clients to stop doing that. So Ikra's talked about mindsets. So essentially mindsets are the changes you need to make to your attitude, predominantly, how you approach the world, how you make your way through the world in relation to your business. Now, what I'm going to talk about is perhaps slightly more practical, in the sense that it's about the changes you make in your actions in the world. So the first one I'm going to look at is called the productivity pyramid. To work, yeah. Now, strategy number 1. What this is about is it's a very strategic, it would be being a strategy, but it's a very strategic view on how you start your business and how you take it to the end point when you've achieved what you want to achieve, and how time is leveraged during that. So we'll start off at the beginning. So first bit is improve. At the very beginning, you've got loads of time and you invest a lot of time. So what's the best thing to do with your time then? I know myself, when I started, almost 20 years ago now, essentially I had loads of time and no money and no clients. So I spent a lot of time getting better at what I was trying to do. I got training courses, etc. You put a lot of time in, you don't get a lot of return on that at the beginning. Eventually, what happens is you get busier and busier and busier and busier. So you're putting a lot of time in, your return's getting better, but it hits a governing point where you can't get any more. There's only one of you, you can only do so much. So in order to get more return on the time you invest, you take on people to do. You take on employees, subcontractors, you might outsource stuff. This means that, but for the time that you spend, you can actually get a better return on that because other people are doing a lot of the work. So once you've got to that point where effectively you're busy, but you've got other people doing stuff, they get busy. What do you do next? You basically spend even less time, but you get a better return by investing in technology. Now that could be software, it could be, well, it's not just, it could be standing operating procedures, all sorts of things. You put in systems and software in order to get to scale up the business, and you get a better return on your time. Going a bit further, you might actually start creating your own IP or intellectual property, or you might develop some system or technology that's new, and obviously that's where maybe R&D tax credits come into it. But again, you're spending less and less time working in the business and getting a much better return on it. And at the very end, you could get to the point where essentially what you're doing is you're doing something, it might be almost no work in the business. So you could go and do other things. A lot of entrepreneurs will then go and do TED Talks, or they just do things that they want to do. They might get involved in charities, but they've slowly increased the return on the time they spend in the business. So strategy number 2, stop working with the wrong people. Now, this is a very common story I hear with clients, and it's something I suppose we've done as well over the years. Again, go back to the previous slide. At the beginning of your business, you've essentially got lots of time and very few customers or clients. So what you do, the most important thing you want to do is get money flowing into the business. So you take on all sorts of clients that maybe you didn't really want to. So you get to a point where you're busy and you've got your structure, you're clear on your ideal client. This may be a few years down the line. And then you realize that, you know, you're spending so much time working with people who really don't get you, or don't play the game, don't cooperate. So as it says, just try to avoid working with people who don't pay your invoices on time. Why should you? You know, you've done your bit, you know, obviously. So why don't, if you don't get paid, why not just say to them, you know, I don't think you really value what we do, so you maybe better find somebody else. People who treat your team badly. Now, I've seen this in the past years ago, where some clients would be very nice to me, but they would be not very pleasant to the rest of the team. Now that has a huge detrimental effect on your team. They say, why are you putting up, why don't you get rid of these people? They're really bad to us. They really don't value us, or they could be rude or whatever. So, you know, it wastes a lot of time because the team feel anxious and they feel undervalued, etc. Why work with people who don't live into your core values? You know, I mean, if you have as a business, we identified what are the most important 3, 4, 5 values for your business, and then you're working with people who are really go right against your values, why work with them? Because that just creates tensions within the work. And again, that leads to bad time, you know, a bit of waste of time. And the last one, why work with people unreliable? Now that most business transactions involve collaboration or cooperation. So if you're an electrician, say, and you work with a builder who, you know, he says, I'll have that done by a certain point so that you can come in and do your work, and he never does. Why work with them? Okay, they might pay you well, but it's quite wasting your time. You could be doing something more constructive. Strategy number 3, run better meetings. Yeah, what we do at Rosland Associates, we about 2 or 3 years ago started, it must be at least that, started using a system called the EOS system, which is set out in a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. What that does, I mean, amongst a lot of other things, it sets out a regular rhythm for meetings. So what we do is, just about every day, we have a roughly 5-minute meeting. It's on Zoom now, obviously. So we say, we go around to everybody, basically, how are you? Sometimes, how are you really? What are you planning to get done today? And do you need anything? So that way, everybody got a chance to speak up and say, yeah, I could really do with you getting back to me about that or whatever. It's a chance just to connect once a day. And then we have a weekly meeting, which is all structured, it has a set agenda. We look at, obviously, to do action points from the previous meeting. We look at our scorecard, we look at the rocks, which are the 3 or 4 things everybody is aiming to do within the next quarter. We check that they're on track. We talk about any highlights in the work or in the team members or clients. And then we have a session talking about issues. And that's basically, we list all the issues and go through them one at a time and decide what we're going to do about it, which usually means some new action points. That takes, very rarely takes more than an hour, but we try to keep it to an hour once a week. But it's a regular, it's always every week, so everybody knows what it, and what that means and how that saves time, essentially, is that there's an opportunity. Everybody knows there's going to be this meeting, so there's an opportunity to raise issues, so that we don't have people knocking on your door or contacting teams, all the time, asking questions, which you could bring up at the meeting. So it saves a lot of time. It makes the meetings very, very productive. And as well as that, going a bit further, we have quarterly and annual leadership meetings to decide on strategy and planning. And these are all done in a regular method, sequence and rhythm as well. So as it says there, set a time limit. We set a time limit of an hour. Sometimes you don't need it, because as we've been using it over several years, then it gets more and more efficient. So we don't the issues at the beginning were pages of them. Now there's maybe 2 or 3 of them at each meeting. Get the scorecard out prior to the meeting so that people know what's where things stand. As it says, set a regular rhythm. Don't just make them ad hoc. Have them on the same time every week or every day. Have a clear agenda for the meeting. Agree actions and avoid lengthy discussions. Essentially, be focused and be accountable. So we check the to-dos. Okay, so that's run better meetings and how that will save you some time. Right. Strategy number 4, the 10 hats organizational review. Some of you will be familiar with this, and the way this saves time, I'll explain what it is in a second, but the way this saves time is it makes clear clarity of roles, responsibilities, and who's doing what within the business. So you don't get people running around doing things that aren't really their job. Everybody knows who's responsible for what, so everything just is much more effective and efficient. So as you can see there, above the line is the strategic section, which is basically the people who guide the business in the direction that it's going to go in. So there's the shareholders and the directors. Often in small businesses are the same people, but they don't have to be. Then below the line, there's the operational. Now, we've got a leader who's a person that makes sure that the business hits its targets, does what it says it's going to do over the week, the month, the quarter, the year. And within that, there's product service development, bringing out new ideas. In our case, it could be bringing out webinars, etc. Operations and delivery. Now that's the cash generating part of the business. That's the part that does the stuff, whether you're an electrician or a marketing person or whatever. That's the people that do it. Sales, marketing, self-explanatory. Finance looks after the money and projects that forward, makes sure you don't run out of cash. Admin and human resources. Now you might think, but there's only one of me. Well, that's because the whole idea here is that everybody has those every business has these departments, but at the start it's usually the founder who's in every single function or every single box. Yeah, so as the founder, if you're the founder of your business, how many of these hats are you wearing at the moment? And which could you consider moving to free up your time to do more important things? So for instance, marketing is often one thing that's outsourced. So you could go to a marketing company who will build your website and do your social media and blogging and things like that. So you don't have to do it. Finance, often maybe get a bookkeeper, that could be outsourced. But gradually what you do is structure it so that it's clear what's happening in each box. But I'll just go into that in a second. Here we go. What that does, the benefits of doing it is it creates clarity. So if you know what the role of sales assistant is, they've got where it fits, who it's accountable to in the chart, in the organizational chart, and what the main functions in that. Then everybody knows where they stand. They know what they've got to do. There's no time wasted doing stuff that's not relevant. It helps improve delegation and development, because if you know who's in what box and where, and who you report to, and who reports to you, then of course you can more easily develop the people get into the higher boxes if that's what they want to be. Clear accountability lines, because each box is underneath another box effectively, and that's where they're accountable to. An interesting thing comes up, it does identify resourcing gaps. So we worked with one client, and it was clear that there was a role called sales assistant, but at the moment one of the directors was actually in that box, and that meant that he couldn't put all his time into the boxes that he really wasn't like director, leader, because he was spending so much time in the boxes that he shouldn't really be in. So what they did was they recruited somebody after they first of all determined what the roles were, what the main roles for that box was, sales assistant box. And then they used that to recruit. And they got somebody in, and I understand they're doing a really good job. And the last benefit basically is to enable the business to grow. It creates like a scaffolding structure, so that the organizational chart is not a once and for all thing. It is a living document, if you like, that grows. As the business develops, you go back and look at it and say, well, actually, there seems to be a role that in that that sort of part of the chart that isn't being fulfilled, or someone's doing it, but it's not the right person. We've had that in our business where we did an organizational chart, and we realized that the client managers were spending a lot of time in the accounts assistant box, which really isn't right. So we had to think about restructuring a little, leads to recruitment, etc., to get somebody who does that job and is good at it, rather than somebody who's meant to be doing, a different job. So strategy number 5, delegate effectively. Well, delegations it's an interesting topic because everybody's got an opinion on it. What typically happens is you've decided that you've got somebody now, you're going to delegate to them. So what you do is you spend 5 minutes showing them how to do the job, and you say, right, okay, there you go, get on with it. So that's not delegation, that's actually abdication. Before we go through a little bit on delegation, I want to say a little bit. It's a thing called situational leadership 2. It's a way of understanding delegation a bit better. When you start somebody, they might be brand new to it. With say Kickstart, you've taken on a 20-year-old and they've never done the job before. So what do? You don't delegate to them. You direct. You sit down with them, or you get somebody to sit down with them and show them step by step how to do the job or the task. After they've done it a little while, they can probably do it themselves, but what they need then is a bit of coaching. So they say, oh, how did I do that? You said, well, remember you did it that time. What did you do next? Oh, right, yeah. So you're giving them a sort of coaching level. Once they get even more experienced in that particular task, they need support. So occasionally they'll come with something new, something that they haven't come across before. At that point, you support them. And once they've done that for a while, eventually you get to the point where you can delegate to them. So you don't just go from directing to delegating. You have to go through a gradual procedure in order to do that. So when you're delegating, so you've gone through that process and you've got to delegation. So you make sure you go delegate it to the right person. You're going to be really clear. You have to be clear in your communications. Not, can you do that by then? It's the case, could you do this task here in front of you? Can you have it done by Friday? And ask them to repeat back what you've asked them to do. Because if they can't repeat back, it means you don't understand. Set a time frame so that they know when they have to do it by. Make it clear what you expect, and that they understand and agree that that's reasonable. Again, and set a time to come back together. Abdicating is if you issue a task to someone and you forget all about it. You just, you've got to, the delegator has to take some responsibility for making sure that the task's done. You might say, well, I haven't got time to do that. Well, eventually you won't have to maybe necessarily check it because it will become part of that person's job, which they're competent to do. You're abdicating if you give little and unclear information. So you basically get that done by then, and ask me if you don't understand. If you don't check that you are actually understood, then the chances are they'll go off and do something completely different, and then you'll be annoyed. Don't set a time frame. Basically they'll say, well, I don't know when it's to be done by. I'll just simply slip down the priority. If you don't clarify and agree objectives and expectations, then again, the person that you're so-called delegating to really won't know what to do. And if you don't review the outcomes, there's a very high chance that the task won't actually get done. So if you delegate properly, it builds trust and respect. I won't read all these out. Basically, it's a good thing. And if you abdicate and don't delegate properly, this is what happens. Low productivity and efficiency, again, wasted time. You're wasting the person's skills because if you think that they just can't do it, but the reason they can't do it is because they weren't delegated properly, you don't give them any other work. So it actually is a lack of resources. So you can see why, if you can learn to delegate effectively, then you can save a lot of time in your business. A lot of people say, I haven't got the time to delegate, I'll just do it myself. But how many times, if you do that, how many times do you do it yourself? And think of all the time that if you spent, it might take you 10 minutes to do a job, but if you do that 100 times, that's a lot of time. Whereas if you spend an hour delegating properly, then that person will be able to repeat the task and you won't have to actually do it again. So you're saving time. It's about doing the right thing for the future, if you like. So you've got your new mindsets. Excuse me, I need a drink. You've got your new mindsets that Ika was talking about. You've got your strategies. Once you've implemented all that, you will create time. So what are you going to do with it? So we've got another poll here. I think Alice is going to put the link in it. So if you could put your answers, what will you do with the time that you create? I'll give people some time to, I'll go to the results and see what happens. Refresh it a few times, give people a chance. Maybe the link's not working. I'll refresh it again. Aha, here we go. Refresh it. Ah, that's better. Work on the business structure is the favorite at the moment. I like that. That's what we like people doing. What else have we got? We've got think, that's good. Read more, work on the business. Travel when allowed, yes. Sail, read, be a better dad. Spend time with family, wow. And it's refreshed again. Let's see what else we've got. Might give it one more refresh. Think comes up top. Excellent. I like being a better dad. Breathe. Spend time with the family. Yep, that's the whole idea. As we say, you know, your business should be there for you, not the other way around. So if you can actually adopt the mindsets and the strategies to create more time, then you can do all these things. Fantastic. Right. I will just minimize that. Okay, and I get my mouse to work. So what about you? You know, essentially, you know, how are you going to look after yourself? You know, we've got to look after ourselves because if we're the business leader, we can't run the business if we're not well. So whether that's in the previous slide, we talked about sharpening the saw. It's doing the things that make you put in a position to be able to make the most of your business. And when you've reclaimed your time, the life that's free for you. So just to remember that. So what are your next steps? Because we've talked about mindsets, we've talked about strategies, but the point is, what are you actually going to do? That's the, because as anybody will tell you, it's all very well thinking about things, and think came up on the poll, but unless you actually take action, nothing's going to happen. So we've got some suggestions up here. We've got define the distractions you'll minimize. So if you remember, you were talking about atomic habits, and that's a book I would highly recommend if you want to make changes in what you do day to day. The author is James Clear, and he has basically broken down the structure of habits, you know, cue, the 4 steps that you talked about, the cue, the craving, the response, and reward. Now, and he goes through it, showing you how to make it more likely that you, at each step, how you make it that you will start a new habit and make it a habit, and also how you will stop a bad habit and keep it as a bad habit that you stop, if you like. So find out the distractions, and decide which habits you're going to create, which ones you're going to stop. Identify your 3 most important actions. Now, I would suggest that if you've got a pen and paper just now, write it down. Write down what your 3 most important things you're going to do after this webinar. That doesn't have to be today, but what you're going to do in the near future to reclaim that time that we were trying to show how to do. Focus on what you can do. Now, Stephen Covey talks about this in the 7 Habits, the idea of your circle of influence. There's no point in trying to change something that you have no control over. You can't change the weather, but you can change what you do, and you can change lots of things in your environment that you have control over. And the final thing is get support. Get somebody to hold you accountable. If you say you're going to do these 3 things and you're going to change these habits, it's so easy just to start it for a little while and stop and not do it. So get support. That support can be, a partner, a business partner, a life partner. It could be like a mastermind group that you're part of. It could be anybody that you trust, a mentor, somebody maybe who you respect and who will hold you accountable because they care and won't be scared to tell you that you're not doing what you said you would do. It could be your coach as well. We can do some things to help. We can do a 10 Hats organisational review. That's £2,500 plus VAT typically. And the reason it's that is because it has made an absolutely fundamental effect on the growth of a business, and the value of that is incredible. We know that because we get feedback from our clients that it really does help clarify where the business is, how it's going to grow, and how do you put a price on that. Accountability coaching, that essentially is typically a monthly. So we meet monthly. What our clients do is we send them out, first of all, some pre-work, which basically says, essentially they ask them what's on their mind, what do they want to talk about. It doesn't always turn out that is what they want to talk about, but it gives them a start, something to go on. Then during the session, we'll work on what they're doing, why they're doing it, what changes they need to make, and then hold them accountable at the next meeting to see if it's worked. And if it ties in with financial stuff, then obviously we can hold them accountable to their business plan and their forecasting and hitting budgets, etc. We have a worksheet, which, if you remember the last slide from Ikra, which was the Stephen Covey quadrant, the achiever matrix, we've got a little worksheet which you can use to help you determine where you're wasting time, when you're in the wrong quadrants, etc. If you'd like that, when you leave the webinar, if you ask for it, we will send it out to you. And fourthly, we have a complimentary meeting for we offer it to all business clients, and also we offer it to anybody who's interested, because our task in the world is to help businesses be better. So we do it quite frequently with people who come along and speak to us, and what we'll do is sit down, look at the business. What did you want your business to be when you started? Are you achieving it? If not, why not? What could you do differently? Is there anything we can help with? So it's a 1-hour free meeting. And that's it. What I was going to do now is go to some questions. Ikra, do we have any questions?
Yep, we've got a couple of questions so far. So if anyone's got any more, please do just put them in the Q&A box. They are anonymous, so we won't mention any names. So please do put them in the box if you've got any questions. But just to get us started, we've got a couple so far which came in through the webinar. First one is, I feel like I spend most of my time answering my team's questions and don't manage to get my own work done. What would you suggest I do to help this?
That's quite a complex question, because I would probably want to ask what sort of questions they're asking. If you think back to some of the strategies and mindsets we talked about earlier, it could be that there's lack of training. It could be that they've been, the jobs have been dumped on them rather than delegated properly. It could be that the business has no organizational structure, so people don't know really what their main job is and how they fit into the organization as a whole. It could be that connected to that, I suppose it could be that the person asking the question is in too many boxes. They're doing jobs that they shouldn't be doing. Finally, I suppose it could be that they've just got the wrong people doing the job. There's the whole argument that if you've got the wrong person doing the job, they're going to not be able to do it, and they're going to have to ask loads of questions. So I don't think it's an easy answer to that, but it does suggest that there's quite a lot that needs to be done in order to stop that. It would be my response, I suppose.
Yeah. Second question I've got here is, when do you know it is the right time to take on an employee without it being based on the feeling that everyone is just busy and can't take on any more work?
That's a good question. It's funny how many business owners I come across who operate on feeling. Now, as some of you know, I am a trained therapist, so I'm not disdaining feelings, but feelings alone can sometimes be a little bit misleading, because to answer this simply, I think what I would say is you have to be very practical in these situations. I would always say, do a cash flow forecast, a profit and loss forecast, fit the cost of the new person in at the time in the month that they're going to be recruited, and assuming all the numbers are realistic, then can you afford it? And that's the reason I say that is because if you can't afford it, it's not the right time. I would probably, before recruiting, I would be looking internally and saying, have we got the right people in the right seats? Are they doing the right things? Are our systems in place that mean, the number of clients I work with who, before they recruit, what they do is they review their standing operating procedures, they review how they do things, and ask questions like, does this add anything? Does this stage add anything to what we do? So and if it doesn't, get rid of it. So basically make the work, the operations more effective and more efficient before you start spending money on new people. It's very tempting just to go and get more people, but in a sense, all you're doing is multiplying inefficiencies. So get an organizational review done, look at your systems, make sure that they're all as effective as they can be. And if you still think that you need somebody, do the forecasting and make sure you can afford it, I suppose, is I was going to say the short answer, but it's slightly long answer.
Thanks, Ian. Another question just popped up. Ian, how do you manage your time, and how has that changed since you started your business?
Well, if you go back to this, the pyramid thing, the productivity pyramid, I've kind of been through that, most of it anyway. The very beginning, it was just me, no clients, no money, lots of time, as I said, and that meant that I had to focus on sales and marketing, if you like. I had to make sure I could get out there and get clients, but there wasn't pressure because there was lots of time. So I think where I am now is I've got to the point where, one, I've got a good team around me, a very good team around me who can do their job. They know what their jobs are and they do their jobs really, really well. And that helps a lot. And we've got structures in place where everybody knows what their responsibilities are, which means that I have time now to spend on what I would call the quadrant 2 stuff, the planning, the strategy, developing new ideas for the business. So I don't feel lots of time pressure, but I do find occasionally that as things, as at certain times of the year, I end up having to do stuff that I don't really want to do. And that means that I start thinking about how can I make that not happen next year. So I don't think it's it's not a static situation, basically. It's an improving process. But I certainly now, my time management is, well, see, when I say time management, that's misleading, because it's not about how I manage my time. It's basically how I manage the structure of the business so that I've got time. You know, it's a slightly different thing. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's kind of how I see it now.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that we've got.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, we're pretty much finished. I want to thank everybody for coming along. I hope it's been helpful. The Mindset's 2 books, as I say, 7 Habits and Atomic Habits, excellent ways to improve your personal efficiency. And there's different strategies, different things you can do, are things that you can actually do with your business to make it more effective, and therefore to make it more time effective. And then you get to the point where you've got your own time back, and then you can go and do the things. You can do your sailing, you can think, you can do all the things that came up on the polling. So that's fantastic. When you go, if you don't mind, could you please complete the webinar feedback, because it really does help us improve these webinars. So if there's no more questions, what I'm going to do now is have a quote from James Clear in Atomic Habits. Good habits make time your ally. Bad habits make time your enemy. So the lesson there is create some good habits and get rid of some bad habits. Make a simple plan today. Define at least 3 actions you'll take as a result of today's webinar. Write them down, whether they're personal actions or business actions. Give each of them an owner and a completion date. And remember, if you do need any help, we are here for you. So thank you very much indeed.